Today is January 25th, 2026. First, welcome to all the folks joining us from yesterday's online workshop. And also, congratulations to everyone who came here in person this morning on this cold, wintry day. Actually, one of the qualities that we develop through this practice, as a side effect, really, is resilience, grit, and along with that, acceptance. Radical acceptance of things as they are. But that doesn't mean that we're trying to become more passive or docile, or not to take responsibility for our being in the world. And with this in mind, this morning, we're going to take a look at what a bodhisattva is, including how we live up to the bodhisattvic vows. Each day at the center, we recite them. We recite the 4 vows at the end of every formal sitting and also after chanting. All beings without number, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates beyond measure, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. What does all of that mean? How do I live up to those vows? In Zen, we understand these vows as a commitment to aligning one's life, to living one's life. With the Buddha Dharma as one's guide, rather than being guided by ego, habits, circumstances. But they can seem like a rather tall order, especially right now. How can one liberate all beings when so much seems out of our reach, out of our control? In case you haven't noticed, increasingly we're living in a time of instability, both national and global. We're seeing a rise in violence, in fear, in anxiety. We're seeing a crisis in leadership, in democracy, in the rule of law. In civil society. And on top of that, there's the ongoing threats to the sustainability of our planet. Our life depends on this planet that we live on. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like, or what language you speak. how can we be of service now in these troubling times? How can we uproot the collective delusion that we ourselves, everyone, each and every one, is a part of this collective delusion? How can we liberate all beings, including oneself? So I want to start off then with defining what a bodhisattva is in the first place. And for this, I'm going to be reading a few excerpts from the book Opening the Hand of Thought by Roshi Kosho Uchiyama. And it's from a section in the book titled The Bodhisattva Vow. Uchiyama Roshi was a Soto teacher and priest, and he was born in 1912, same year as Kaplo Roshi, and died in 1998. He wrote a number of books, and his primary message was that Zazen is and needs to be the foundation of one's life. Because a life grounded in Zazen is a life grounded in awareness. He says, a bodhisattva is an ordinary person who has found their life direction in Buddha, in practicing the way of life of a Buddha. You are a bodhisattva. I am a bodhisattva. There are illustrious bodhisattvas like Kannon and Manjushri who embody compassion and wisdom. But we have to have confidence that we too are bodhisattvas. Even as ordinary human beings, when we live by vow, the meaning of our lives totally changes. So that's it. A bodhisattva is just an ordinary person like you and me, living and practicing the best that we can. Practicing within the conditions that we're in. Practicing to activate our intrinsic Buddha nature. And we've got Kannon and Manjushri as sources for inspiration. The Bodhisattva Kannon hears and responds to suffering, the suffering of the world, which is why she is often she's often depicted as having many eyes and arms. And that signifies her unceasing attention, directing it to helping others. And she's often presented in the feminine form, that's why I say she, but sometimes masculine, sometimes androgynous. And sometimes she's incredibly fierce looking, as being unwavering in one's commitment to be of service. But no matter the form Kanon happens to take, the main qualities that come through are having compassion and being responsive to suffering. These are the qualities that define Kanon. And as for Manjushri, he's the Bodhisattva of wisdom. He cuts through ignorance and delusion. Continuously cutting through, penetrating. That's why he wields a sword and rides a lion. So then, each and every time we notice that we're not present, that we've drifted off into thoughts, and then we make that return to our practice, we're actually embodying the spirit of Kanon and Manjushri. Moment by moment that we do that. And these are the two qualities of our true nature in action that we cultivate through Zazen. The wisdom to see clearly, the wisdom to see beyond duality, and the compassion that arises naturally out of that. The desire to be of service and to act on that desire. So in this way, as long as you're doing Zazen and doing your best to make it the foundation of your life, not something you do as an occasional pastime, but really trying to make it a foundation, to make it a part of your daily life. As long as you're working towards that, you're a bodhisattva. And if that seems hard to believe, if you think you've fallen short of the criteria or haven't yet passed Bodhisattva 101, another way to put it is that we're all bodhisattvas in training, bodhisattvas in progress. And Uchiyama speaks to this directly. He says, a bodhisattva living by vow is distinguished from a person living by the continuation of their karma. There is no need to deprecate ourselves thinking that since we are ordinary human beings, we aren't qualified to be bodhisattvas. Precisely because we are ordinary human beings, we possess the earthly flesh. Yet, since we aim in the direction of Buddha, in Zazen, we can make our effort in peace. Since we aim in the direction of Buddha in Zazen, we can make our effort in peace. It's all in the doing. Just by making this effort. We're making real a vow not to be limited or defined by karma. We're working on freeing ourselves from the causes and conditions that got us here, just by doing zazen. And as for karma, that includes not just personal karma, but collective. As one who is part of a family, a nation, a species, a world, what we think, say, and do has an effect. That's what karma means. So if you're walking around spewing anger or steeping in pride, there's an effect both on you and the people you interact with. When it happens on a much larger scale, it's even more impactful. Poison generates more poison. But as long as we're taking responsibility, and again, we're doing that by rooting our lives in zazen, then we're moving in a different direction. We're working on loosening and undoing any tendencies that cause harm. And of course, it's an ongoing process of inner work. It includes repentance, owning up to mistakes, vowing to do better next time. And I'm not suggesting that this is all something that's unique to Zen practice. No doubt there are other contemplative traditions that have similar practices. But it is the heart of what the Buddha taught. Uchiyama goes on, in our day-to-day lives, it is often hard to know what course of action best expresses our Bodhisattva vow, because circumstances pull us in contradictory directions. Going one way seems right, and so does going the opposite direction. How do you choose between competing goods? This is a very difficult problem. Most religious systems have a set of absolutes handed down by their God that tell you what is right or wrong. Buddhism has no absolute authority laying down the law. Instead, you yourself take up the way of the Bodhisattva, living by vow and aiming at Buddha. So again, all we can do is the best that we can. And what the best looks like is going to vary over time, according to life circumstances, from person to person, community to community. That's why it doesn't help to judge oneself or compare oneself to others, judging others for what they're doing or not doing. We need to turn inward and not look outward. What can you do? How can you be of service? What can you do within your means? How can you contribute to disrupting the course of harmful causes and conditions? There's that saying, if you're looking for the one person who will change your life, look in the mirror. But even better, don't look in the mirror. Don't trust appearances. Look within. Uchiyama then tells a story about a master who, in the dead of winter, threw water all over a group of monks who came to train with him. It was a test of their sincerity. And of course, most of the monks got very angry, and all but 2 of them left the monastery to go somewhere else. The ones that stayed simply straightened up their robes and continued to do zazen. The master then threatened to give the 2 remaining a beating, but that also didn't stop them. There's a lot more to the story, but the point is that there were these 2 monks that persisted in the face of adversity. And on this, Uchiyama says, people who are searching for the way can't be called true seekers if they're going to pick up and pack their bags just because they get a little water thrown at them. If you're serious in your searching and intention, you have to be prepared to take whatever comes. To practice Buddhism means to encounter the reality of life. To encounter the reality of life. To be willing to put yourself out for everyone. That's the attitude of a bodhisattva. All our actions should be with the spirit of giving life to the overall situation surrounding us. And despite thinking in those terms, if you make a mistake, then you have to be willing to pay the price. It's no good shrinking from the hell you might have to pay for the deed. So what he's talking about is confronting our karma. Owning up to our own shortcomings without trying to run away or sidestep them. Not shrinking from our responsibility. And what does not shrinking look like? We're doing it right now. Zazen. And of course, it's not just when we're sitting. It's when we take that mind of greater clarity that comes from sitting into the world through our speech and action. He then tells another story. Once there was a monk in our Sangha who was conscripted or drafted during the war. Just before he died in battle, we received a long letter from him. He wrote, "There are many young men like myself here who could get shot at any moment. I really wonder about the sanity of it all. But if I do get hit, what else can I do but shut up and die? It's important to try to keep alive by staying out of the line of fire. But there comes time when you find yourself standing right in it. Life just isn't so cut and dried that it's possible for us to eliminate that possibility." What Uchiyama is pointing to in this story is that we're not in control. We're not in control of anything, despite our efforts. Sometimes all we can do is just be right there. Be in the line of fire. And that includes being one with your conditions, being one with aging and sickness, disability, and ultimately with dying. All the things that we cannot avoid. This is what our practice prepares us for. There's a koan in the Blue Cliff record that speaks to this. It's case number 29. And I'll just read the case. A monk asked Dasui, when the conflagration at the end of the kalpa, or we can say when the fire at the end of the kalpa, a kalpa is some immeasurable length of time. When the fire at the end of the kalpa sweeps through and the great cosmos is destroyed, I wonder, is this one destroyed or not? Dasui replied, it will be destroyed. The monk then asked, will it be gone with everything else? And Dasui said, it will be gone with everything else. This sounds bleak, but it's the truth. We can't erase the causes and conditions that got us here or pretend that they didn't happen. We're basically walking this line of accepting things as they are, being one with things as they are, and at the same time working towards altering the course, of karma, moving continuously in the direction of causing no harm. And all the while not holding on to anything. Because when the fire sweeps through, the fire sweeps through. In the meantime, we have work to do. I gotta say, as I was catching up on the news in the days after Sesshin, I was so heartened to come upon more news stories about this walk for peace that's in progress. It's being undertaken by a group of Vietnamese Theravada monks from a temple in Texas. There are a total of about 24 monks, and they started their pilgrimage back in October. And as they've continued on their way, they're making their way to Washington, D.C. As they've continued on their way, walking day after day, they've been getting more and more media attention. Also, in the places and towns that they walk through, they're sometimes joined by other walkers, hundreds and thousands of people who participate, who follow them. And next month, if all goes smoothly, they're going to arrive in Washington, D.C., having walked about 2,300 miles. And along their journey, they've had to deal with a lot of difficulties, including early on, one of the monks got hit by a car and was so seriously injured that his leg had to be amputated. There's also a rescue dog with them, and the rescue dog's, his leg got injured, and he had to get surgery. And in general, there's the physical pain and strain on the body and the feet in doing this amount of walking. Amazingly, some of the monks are walking barefoot as much as they possibly can. Although I wonder if they're doing that today. They're currently in North Carolina and having to deal with the same winter storm that we are experiencing. Anyway, there's a blog that they have and a post I want to read from. It's an explanation of their mission, and it speaks to the Bodhisattva ideal. It begins, "Some people may doubt that our walk can bring peace to the world, and we understand that doubt completely. But everything that has ever mattered began with something impossibly small. A single seed, a first mindful breath, a quiet decision to take one step, then another. Our walking itself cannot create peace. But when someone encounters us, whether by the roadside, online, or through a friend, when our message touches something deep within them, when it awakens the peace that has always lived quietly in their own heart, something sacred begins to unfold. That person carries something forward they didn't have before. Or perhaps something they had forgotten was there. This is our contribution, not to force peace upon the world, but to help nurture it, one awakened heart at a time. One step becomes two become 1,000. 1,000 become countless. And slowly, gently, persistently, not through grand gestures, but through 10,000 small acts of love, we can help make the world more peaceful. This is our hope. This is our offering. This is why we walk. Okay, the cynics among us might say, yeah, this is all very nice. These monks are doing good. They're spreading a good message. But under the current situation, it's not enough. We're in crisis, and the outcome is uncertain. Cultivating mindfulness and kindness is not enough, you might say. Well, yes and no. Because if your mind is spinning in thoughts about what is happening, or about what the next catastrophe is going to be, what good are you doing? What is your contribution if your mind is spinning? You're not really in a good position to respond with clarity from a calm, stable center. And instead you run the risk of responding out of reactivity, out of duality, out of greed, anger, and delusion, the three poisons. These are the three unwholesome mind states that the Buddha identified as the main drivers of our suffering. If we were to respond out of greed, that might involve clinging to our beliefs and ideas in a righteous way, as if they're superior, as if my view, the way I see things, my pain, my suffering is all that matters. And of course that cuts us off from listening, from understanding, from dialogue. And if we were to respond out of anger, we might dwell in thoughts of ill will, even hatred. Also fear towards those we see as responsible for things as they are. And in turn, We're not recognizing that the way things are is a product of something much larger. Much, much larger. Causes and conditions of the past that are beyond our control. All we can do is work with them from here, from this moment. And then there is the third poison, delusion, which is sometimes referred to as ignorance. And of course, it's not in the sense of lacking information or lacking book knowledge, but in the sense of relying on a narrow and mistaken perception. Prejudice, denial, not seeing the big picture, seeing things from the vantage point of duality. Me versus you, us versus them. But there is another way. The way that begins with looking within. We'll stop here and recite the 4 vows.